on this episode of our next top reading model.
Two beautiful readers stand before me, but I only have one photo in my hands. And this photo represents the reader that is still in the running towards becoming America's next top reading model. I'll only call one name, and the reader that I do not call must immediately return to the house and pack your bags.
We are Red Rather Christians.
I'm Jen.
I'm Steve.
And we are expats living in Spain trying to restore faith in humanity one story at a time.
On this season of Red Rather Christians, we'll be highlighting the feel-good stories that make us smile and remind us of the good in humanity.
We hope that as you listen, you become more mindful of the good, and that if you don't see it, you do it.
Or you be it.
All right, so we started with a maybe familiar little quote to you guys, hearkening back to a show that I admit I did used to watch.
Is it still on?
I don't think so.
I have no idea.
America's Next Top Model with Tyra Banks.
The crux of this is that at the end of the episode, you know, the whole most dramatic rose ceremony ever, whatever thing the Bachelor has going. Well, Tyra takes this to another level with the final picture of the model who's going to be the girl who's named in the picture with the face of the same girl who is not going to be leaving the house.
I mean,
like, what?
Because I watched this show, Steve ended up also watching this show, and we both definitely could not wrap our minds around all these words that she said at the end. It was so bad. It was so bad. Okay, I mean, let's go through this a little bit. The very first thing, I only have one photo. This, my friends, is a misplaced adverb. It shouldn't say I only have, like, that's all she has in her life. Like, that's it. She only has the photo and nothing else. She only has it. It should say I have only one photo, because the only is modifying what? The one photo, not the have. Okay. I'm sorry if I'm getting too technical. But here, you can talk about the next one, Steve.
So now this photo is supposed to be representing the person?
Who
it is the person!
Yes, and the person is there!
I don't understand why you would say it represents them when it is them.
Oh my gosh.
It's a photo of them.
Okay, the other thing that she does wrong here is her references, like pronoun, noun, antecedent kind of a situation. So she starts with, I'll use our quote, the word reader, which is a human, but then references the reader as a that, which is a thing. So when she says, the reader that I do not call, I think in the original it's the girl that I do not call. It's like, a girl is a human. The girl who I don't call.
And again, she'll only call instead of I'll call only one. Misplaced adverb only. Is only calling the only thing she's going to do?
That's the only thing she's going to do. By golly.
Only call.
Only call. And then this is a POV shift from third person to second person. She starts by saying the girl, which is third person, and then it's a point of view shift to second person when she says your bags. So the girl or the reader that I do not call must immediately return to the house and pack your bags. She's saying the girl. Say her bags. It is so bad. Steve and I would laugh every time.
And we don't know why there wasn't editing.
I know. How did this get past the editing stage? And everyone was like, well, looks good to me. But today we are talking about being a reading model.
A reading model for whom?
For anyone in our lives, but especially our kids. For parents, I think that is such an important job that you have, is to be a reading model for your kids.
If what you want them to do is read.
What parent doesn't want their kids to read?
I'm just saying, there are certain
weird.
things. Modeling behavior is a good thing.
Yes.
So if reading is also what you perceive to be a good thing, you need to model that. Which is why our reading journeys are different. And growing up, I was told to read. I was encouraged to read. Pizza Hut had their Book It Challenge, which I definitely read my book a month most of the time to get my personal pan pizza.
Food motivated this kid. Yeah. Like a little dog.
But after having seen that as a teacher, it's important for my kids to see their math teacher or their physics teacher also reading books.
Aww.
By a certain special English teacher.
Aw, that's me.
At my school.
Well, I started this initiative when we were both teaching, and I printed out these papers for all the teachers, and I told them, post this on your door, and it just said at the top, like, their name, and then, like, what they're reading, and then they would just kind of fill that in. And so, of course, Steve has to do this because he's my husband, but he wants to as well, don't you? Didn't you?
Mm-hmm.
You did. So, you just said you did.
I'm saying I was motivated by a certain special English teacher at my school.
Oh my gosh. And for your love of reading and being able to connect with the students. So, it was fun. I say fun. I like to think it was fun for the students to see what their teachers were reading. In reality, it was probably like, whatever. But every now and then, a student could connect with a teacher based on what the teacher was reading.
There was definitely a time, especially from middle school, I'd say through the end of college, where I very rarely read a book for fun outside of the classroom.
Yeah, that's what the research says, actually. It's like in middle school is when it starts to drop off for kids. They have been reading for fun and then they stop. Why? Well, I'll tell you. In large part, it has to do with school and doing all these things for school. Assignments, you have to read this book for school and so forth. And also their schedules start getting busier with other sports and after-school activities. So it takes a dive around middle school, typically.
But even in my young adult life, my young married life, I wasn't really reading. I look back and I say I wasn't using that time very productively,
Yeah.
arguably, especially in the reading side of things. But I've also learned that it's never too late to actually read a book. Those books that I thought I wanted to read when I was younger are still there.
They certainly are.
They were very patiently waiting for me to catch up to a point when I would read again.
And maybe some of those books that you wanted to read as a kid, you are now reading to your kids out loud.
That is true. And I'm realizing I didn't miss much.
Some of them, yes. Ooh, there's some rough kids books out there.
We also know that if you haven't talked to Jen recently or in the past, 6 years since she read this book, reading books is good for your sleep habits.
Yes, I've talked about it before. It's a book called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker.
It's got to be in the show notes at
Should
some
I link
other
it
episode.
again in the show notes? It's been linked before. Yeah, it's a life-changing book right there. But yeah, read 15 minutes before you go to bed. You can do it. I actually have kind of a similar reading journey to you, but not quite as pronounced. I grew up loving to read. I read all the time. And then it did take a dive. It took a dip in middle school. And because I was reading books that were assigned to me. And again, I felt like I didn't have as much time and this and that. And then I got into high school and it was so hectic with homework and stuff. My number one thing was always, I don't have time. I have time to read the assigned book, barely. And then I don't have any other time after that. Same with college, lots of assigned books, especially when I realized, oh gosh, I want to minor in English. And I'd already completed, 2 years of college at that point. So I was reading a lot of books. And finally, like in my mid-20s, I was like, oh, hey, I like reading. I remember that I like reading and I started picking it up again. And now I'm a pretty voracious reader again. And so is Steve.
Yeah, I suppose so. But I will say another thing that happened for me, it started in the bathroom.
Okay.
It was the bathroom reader. It happened to be in the St. John's male faculty bathroom. And it was just sitting there, as was I.
Oh my gosh.
And I would just read it like a couple pages at a time. And soon enough, I read the whole thing. I'm like,
gosh.
Wait a second. Is there another one? Sure enough, there was another one.
Oh my word.
And then it's like, wait, I have this time that I'm already paused. I'm out of otherwise regular life.
Yeah.
I can read during this time.
Instead of just sitting there. And this was before you had a phone even.
That's probably why I read the book because I didn't have a phone.
Yeah.
Most people just take their phone into the bathroom and scroll or whatever. I get that. I've done that too. But I've realized that if I leave my phone out of the bathroom.
Oh, yeah. It's better.
And I just have a book in the bathroom.
Yes.
I read that book ever so slowly, sure. But I'm reading.
But. Yes, and Mary Virginia put those books in there. She's stocked up.
It was right outside the door.
Yes, it works. It works. We love it.
I read some random David Baldacci novel.
Oh my gosh. David Baldacci.
Just because it was there. And I was too.
Hey, that's great. Reading books, we love it. I think one thing that reading books does for us, is it slows our pace of life way down. We are so accustomed to having everything at our fingertips so quickly. And then even when we are kind of taking a break from work and we're just scrolling on social media or whatever, the little videos and the reels and the pictures, they come at us so fast. I have found myself being really affected by this to the point where I will be watching a movie and then sometimes also getting out my phone.
Because you're bored.
Because it's like not enough stimulation for me or something. It's not good. So as I'm speaking these words, I am realizing more and more that I need to limit my social media because it is changing my brain. I believe that that's true. It's changing my brain and it's shortening my attention span. I need to be able to sit and read a book for an extended period of time without having to stop and look at something on my phone or blah, 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 blah.
What I'm actually hearing, though, is you need to be able to stop and read your book without interruption from kids. That's the hardest part.
Okay, that is hard. And I will say that's another excuse that I use to be on my phone sometimes, is that if I'm just scrolling or doing something dumb, like it doesn't matter if I'm distracted by the kids because I'm doing something dumb. If I'm reading a book and I'm distracted, that annoys me. It's weird. It's weird what our brain does to tell us what we should be doing. All that to say, reading a book slows the pace down. The research does back this up, that it increases our attention spans. And this is why, one of the reasons, it is so important to get kids reading so that they can have the attention span to read. By the time they've gotten to high school and they haven't been reading, but they have been going on phones and being on their computers, it's going to be so much more difficult for that reading habit to come about.
And another great thing about reading that I've learned, specifically trying to read in a different language, is I know that it causes growth in my hippocampus and cerebral cortex.
Did you know that, or are you reading my notes?
Well, I knew that it helped me.
Yes. Yes. Yeah, that is also, research has shown this, that it causes brain growth, reading in a different language. Even more brain growth than just reading in your native language. So that's good news for us, Steve.
Woohoo!
Our brains are growing.
Not really, but in some ways, yes.
Yes, they definitely are. I believe that. But speaking of brains changing, it is a fact that they have seen on MRIs and whatnot that reading does change your brain. It increases the white matter in your brain.
CAT scans?
White matter, maybe CAT scans, MRIs, I don't know. What's the difference? I know what MRI stands for, though. Magnetic resonance imaging or something like that. Blah, 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 whatever. White matter is important for learning and problem solving, my friends. And who doesn't want that? Reading books in perspectives that are unlike ours, or reading books by people who are unlike us. This is good for our empathy. Reading books talking about issues that we disagree with increases our empathy.
What if I just ban those books because I don't like the material or the people or the content that they're talking about? Should we just ban books?
Yeah, I guess so. Yep, that sounds like a good solution. Or burn them. Banning, burning, anything else starting with B. This is good. I think we're really doing some good brainstorming right now.
No, but I'm actually asking, because people ban books they've never read, they don't even have the awareness of what's in the book or the context in which the things they don't like about it are written.
Well, that's one of the problems with this banning books thing is that the people who are picking out the books that they think should be banned have read a passage from the book completely out of context, and they use that passage to represent the entire book. And now they want this book to be banned and get it out of the libraries, and they don't even know the full context of it.
Are some books just objectively bad and should not be read?
I think it gets trickier when you are a teacher in a classroom with a bunch of different personalities in your room. You do have to take some time to think about who you have in your classroom that year when you're choosing your books. But also, you have to have good conversation with your students before you read a book about how to read a book, about what to do when you get to a part that you disagree with, about what to do when you get to a part that you feel like, oh, this is inappropriate for me. You have to, maybe it's called front load. You have to give the students information on how to read a book before they begin. And I think you have to educate the parents as well, because they're really getting it out of context because they're just getting bits and pieces that their kids bring home with them, right? Like as parents, we all know this to be true. And as teachers, for Steve and me, we definitely know this to be true. The kids bring home only tidbits and normally the bad ones. So as parents, we have to be very discerning on this and seek larger context, but also educate ourselves and understand, like we can tell our kids, hey, if this makes you feel uncomfortable, ask yourself why and dig a little deeper and have a good conversation with your child instead of just immediately saying, oh my gosh, this is scary. Oh my gosh, this is sad. Oh my gosh, this is violent. Oh my gosh, this is too sexual or whatever, and just shut the book and put it away. Open up the doors to conversation.
So in my experience, I did teach 1 year of English. I had to let the parents decide if their kids, they could skip the chapters if they wanted to in I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings.
Well, this was also at a Christian school, let's keep in mind.
But they decided to keep the sex part out and the sex abuse part out. Just like that doesn't happen. That didn't happen in her life. This is a memoir.
Wait. So the letter that went home to the parents said, your kid's going to read the book, but without these parts, or your kid is allowed to read the entire book. That was like the option.
Those are your two choices.
Oh, wow. That like hurts my heart as an English teacher to even hear that, because you're taking out parts of the book that make the book what it is. And parts of that book in particular is about her life, about Maya Angelou's life.
I know.
And you're just like, oh, I don't want them to know about what really happened to her, when it's like, that is what increases empathy. That's it. Like, is it a little uncomfy? Maybe it is. But maybe that's exactly what you need to read so that you become a better human.
We've got to fight for these rights to read.
We got to fight for our right to have a reading party.
Now, before I met Jen, I had never even heard of this term reading party. What did you do?
I invited friends over. Like, we made a fort and we got flashlights and we just read.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't have imagined anything more boring as a child.
It was fun. We read good books, Steve.
I'm sure Anne of Green Gables was involved.
Oh, well, yeah, definitely.
We'd
have like snacks and stuff.
Anyway, book banning is something that we are not for. Because here's the thing. If you are so concerned that your child picks up a book, or that, oh my gosh, a fellow adult picks up another book that you think has inappropriate content in it, they have to sift through that for a while to get to that content that is in context and then may not be as bad as you think it is.
I just don't understand why the conversation is so centered on books when there is this little thing called the internet.
YouTube.
Oh my gosh. Hello. Do parents not know what is out there on screens for their children?
So many bad things are so much more easily accessible and not written down.
I can't. I can't. It does not make any sense to me why books are being targeted. What does make sense is that it's just a political move. It's just a political move. And that's also annoying in many other different ways.
So as a teacher, when people say, oh, the books are so bad, or that's why we shouldn't read them, like, what are the other reasons, though, that someone says, reading books isn't even good? What's bad about reading books?
Okay, the number one reason I hear again and again and again and again is that I don't have enough time to read. I'm too busy. Why would I go to the library to borrow a book? I only get it for 2 weeks. There's no point in any of that. I'm not going to finish anyway, so I might as well not start. And that is ridiculous. It is an excuse. It's an easy excuse for you to use, and you need to stop. There is time in your day to read. And if there legitimately isn't, you need to reassess your life, man. You need to figure out what you're doing that you can take out of your life. Another excuse for not reading books is not having access to English books. This might be the case for us right now. Living in Spain, there aren't a lot of libraries here. In general, it's not such a reading culture here, and there certainly aren't libraries that have English books.
We do have a library in our town, as we mentioned. That's
Yes.
awesome. But one of the amazing things about being international and still having connections to the US, or even my friend Zach being in the US, digital libraries exist.
Yes, and we don't love reading on our phones, but it is nice to have the option. We use the Libby app, and we are connected to our old library in Florida, and it's great.
But Zach told me he's connected to 3 different libraries, one of which is New York City's library. He has access to any book pretty much at any time. It's fantastic.
I have another friend, Mika, who is connected to at least 2 different libraries, and she is an Ecuadorian citizen. And so she just has friends in the States who let her use their library card number to access this online database.
It's so good.
It's so good.
This is a good thing. We have used technology for the better. Would I prefer print books? Yes. But this is good. Very good. So, there's good in reading. If you can't hear it in Jen's voice as she's stressing you need to read, the good in reading is plentiful. But, like a very good blog post I once read, referencing Michael Pollan's philosophy on eating food, not too much, mostly plants, we do want to focus on read books, not all of one kind, mostly print.
Yes. Thank you, Stephen. You're so kind. That was a blog post I wrote. Read books, not one kind, mostly print. So you referenced my blog post. Thank you very much. Now I'll reference something that you would say, and this is like an investment analogy. You need to diversify your portfolio of reading.
Absolutely. Read different types of material. So how many financial books have you read now, Jen?
Listen, it counts still kind of that you read the books and then we
okay,
have conversations about the books.
That's fair. That's fair. And I like that idea, that you are connected with people who are reading other books too. And that is a part of being a human.
Yes.
And community.
And being in good relationship with others. I'm not talking, well, you have to join a book club. How about you read a book? Maybe your partner reads a book or a friend reads a book, and then you talk about the book together as humans.
And I would tell Jen, you wouldn't like this book. Don't bother reading it. I read it. Here's the information that's useful to us.
Right.
Now, we also get the people who are like, oh, I don't want to read that book because it's a fiction book. I read mostly nonfiction. That's just what I like. It's like, hey, that's fine. If you have personal preferences, that's great. And if you're reading, also great. We're cheering that. But we would also say, if you read mostly nonfiction, don't only read biography and memoirs.
Don't only read sports.
Don't only read politics, especially if it's all on the same side.
Oh gosh. Don't only read religious books.
That's putting yourself in what people kind of fear or yell at each other with that, oh, you're in an echo chamber. If all you read are the same types of books, you're hearing the same types of things. And it's validating whatever you're currently thinking and wanting to think, and you're not getting outside and you're not building that empathy that Jen was talking about.
This point that we're making, like, oh, if nonfiction, make sure that it's like at least different kinds. No, I don't want you to just get in the rut of nonfiction either, because fiction has amazing merits as well. You need fiction in your life. You do. You need a little bit of an escape. You need to read about characters who aren't real, maybe even a little bit of fantasy or science fiction. These things are enjoyable for us, but also they take us out of real life a little bit, and we need that break.
Yes, because fiction can provide you with a few things, like a mirror. You see yourself in these characters, whether for good or bad, that you didn't otherwise think about.
Exactly. I had a student, we were in AP Literature, and we read a short story called Everyday Use by Alice Walker. And so I had this student read this short story about a quilt, okay?
And a couple of sisters.
Yes. And she resonated in a very deep way with this character who wanted to put the quilt on display. But we were discussing this in class about how, like, well, what is her identity? Like, she doesn't even really know it. She doesn't even know who she is. And my student, through this discussion, as it was coming to a close, started crying because she related so much to that character, not really understanding who she was and simply wanting to put the quilt on the wall and not understanding how someone could take something so beautiful and just use it.
Yeah.
And it was crazy. Like, I'm getting a little emotional right now as I retell it because that's what fiction does.
Can do.
Can do. Thank you, Steve. Always the hyperbole over here. I'm passionate about it, okay? Like, it's when you can read a book and emote, there is something happening there, something deep, stirrings within you that you need to search.
Now, we've also mentioned the tortoise and the hare with the slow lane episode. That is a fable. I don't know if Aesop should get credit for all the fables, but there are plenty of fables involving animals or things, and it's an analogy. There's a moral to the story. They're fiction. These animals aren't talking to each other. They're not interacting in these ways. But what do we get out of it? We're like, oh, wow.
How many times have you heard that reference, like the tortoise and the hare, or just the idea of it is like, take it slow and steady, slow and steady wins the race.
Well, let me tell you one that I've read recently to Memphis. It's The Wolf and the Crane. Not a common one, folks, but when you read kids' books, you read a lot of weird stuff like this.
Don't even get me started with all the Brothers Grimm stuff that I read to the kids. That stuff was disturbing. But anyway.
The wolf gets a bone stuck in its throat and then is kind of able to choke out a request to this crane. Hey, the crane, the bird, not like this big crane that's just like lifting. Anyway.
Bob the Builder.
Hey, crane, stick your head in there in my mouth and get this thing out with your long beak. This bone is stuck in my throat. And the crane's like, yeah, no thanks. What's in it for me? He's like, I'll give you something. And the crane's like, oh, cool, okay, I guess maybe. And does it, gets the bone out. And the wolf's like, thanks, and goes to leave. And the crane's like, hey, what the heck? You said you'd give me something for that. He's like, yeah.
I'm not going to eat you?
You've got a story. You stuck your head in a wolf's mouth, and you didn't die.
Oh.
So that you came out on the other side after doing something very scary.
Yeah.
Okay, kind of a moral of the story. I don't know when I'm really going to do something like that, but wow, right? You get these weird fictional stories, and there's still a moral to it. Application. You can take fiction and apply it in your real life. It's a connection.
All right, we've been talking a lot about books, but we haven't really referenced too many specific books. We would like to take this opportunity to tell you we are both on Goodreads.
Be our friends.
Be our friends on Goodreads. I am always thrilled to take time out of my life to scroll through, like, literally all the books I've read to find personalized recommendations for you. I have a few people in my life who will text me like twice a year just to ask me, like, hey, can you recommend a book for me? I've been in a rut, or I'm feeling this way, or whatever. And I'm like, happily, I would love to. So take us up on that. Steve is always up for giving a recommendation as well.
I read far fewer books, so my recommendation list is smaller.
That's okay. That's okay.
But definitely different than Jen's.
Yes, very different. More Russian literature on there than mine.
Yeah,
sure.
it's pretty good.
Yeah. What we want to say here, people, is be the reading model for the people in your lives.
Because it's a good thing.
Don't just talk about reading like we just spent over half an hour doing. Do it.
Let people see you do it.
Let your kids see you do it.
In fact, quick story, I was reading this philosophy book on the airplane, and someone was coming in, they were sitting right behind us, and you see things, and when I was reading this print book, he could see what book I was reading, which is more important than if I was just reading on my phone.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh my gosh, a philosophy book? Yes. And it's by Huxley? Wow, I haven't seen that one. I teach philosophy at this college, whatever. Awesome. And we connected over that because he could see that I was doing it. It was a good thing.
That is literally my dream scenario. Why has that ever happened to me? Ugh. No, but I think about that story about the guy on the plane or whatever. And what it makes me think of is I have seen this. I know it's true because I saw it on social media that guys use books to pick up girls. They will go sit at a coffee shop with some like philosophy book or something that makes them seem really smart and just basically pretend to read.
Yes, but these things happen. Animals in the wild do what they need to do to earn rights to mate.
Yeah, earn the right to mate. Earn the right. Hey, a book isn't the worst way to do it. It would be better if they were actually reading it, though.
Yes. So, we want you to ask yourself some questions. At least this one. What is the book you've read this year that has been life-changing?
Not the Bible.
Sorry, not a religious text in general. Let us know what that book is, because we like to read that.
Yeah.
And if you haven't read one yet, there's still time to read it.
Okay, so we have to end with our life-changing book that we've read this year.
I don't know what the qualifications are for life-changing, but really, really good was Les Mis. I've already referenced it. It was way better than I could have ever imagined a tome to be. I didn't regret reading any of those pages. And that's crazy to think about. It took me a while. Meanwhile, Jen is now scrolling through her Goodreads to find that book that is life-changing.
Shut up. Well, I read a lot of books, so I just need to make sure that I pick a book that's from this year and not accidentally pick a book that's from 2023, okay? Okay, I have mine. It is Tiny Beautiful Things, Advice from Dear Sugar by Cheryl Strayed. Cheryl Strayed is the author who wrote Wild, From Lost to Found on the Pacific Crest Trail, which I also read, which I also really liked. But Tiny Beautiful Things is a compilation of her advice column, and people write into her asking all these questions. And what it ends up being is a study of the human spirit. And it's beautiful. It is poetic. It is heartwarming. It is real. It is touching. You will laugh. You will cry. Absolutely recommend it. It's so good. And with that, we have reached the end of the episode. And if you don't immediately grab a book right now and start reading after this, we have failed.
But nonetheless, we are Red Rather Christians.
I'm Jen.
I'm Steve. And remember, cheer the good.
Don't ban the books.